Most often in these quick take videos, I've been talking about matters in a way that you could say starts out negative. Somebody is concerned about a matter and I say, well, you don't have to be so concerned about that. If other people are telling you that's really important, here's why they're, only partly right or perhaps entirely off base about that. So this is a very different one where I'm going to begin by talking about something quite positive, something that I think that you can use as an index for your own development, your intellectual development, and it should tie in with things in the rest of your life as well when it comes to philosophy, perhaps also you could say with other connected fields as well. So history, literature, psychology, maybe even things off in other fields like the sciences or music or business. And I'll tell you a little bit of a story because it's something that people have brought up in the past, but really came home to me in my tutorial sessions with a client of mine who's come to become a good friend over time, and somebody who got interested in philosophy rather late in his life, rather recently, and that's how he found his way to me. And, watched some of my videos and got connected with me, and then we started having tutorial sessions. And it's been several months back. He's brought this up several times, and for me it was something very gratifying to hear about. So he told me, and this is, I would say, after about a year or so of us studying various philosophical texts together, which include the Stoics, but also Arthur Schopenhauer and Rainer Maria Rilke, so a kind of a broad spectrum of various thinkers. He said, as I'm reading these works, I'm finding that there's all sorts of connections between them that I was surprised to see. I didn't think I would find these. They're talking about similar things, but not always in exactly the same way, and sometimes taking different positions. And it's almost like there's a network of things that are accumulating in my head. Reading one thought leads me to another thought, and I see that they are connected, and sometimes even how they're connected. And it's a really surprising experience. And then he wanted to know, is this normal? And I said, yeah, not only is that normal, but that's like a sign that things are going right for you in your studies. I've gone through that myself. I've seen other people go through it. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. I want to linger over something that might be important for you to hear. So when he told me about that, it was, and I told him, a source of great joy for me to hear that, because it shows that he's, so to speak, learning a map. It's a map with many parts still yet to be filled in, perhaps only sketched, but it's a vast map of human thought, and he's figuring out how to make his way around. He's accumulating familiarity with the terrain, with the different routes and locations, and seeing connections between things. And for me, to hear him talking about that, it made me very happy to hear that, in part because our studies together were producing this effect. So, I play some small part in it. Of course, he plays a much greater part because he's the one actually doing the reading, and it's his brain where these connections are being formed that he's aware of. But, I could take a certain sense of pride as well as joy in this thing working out for him like that. But it's also something wonderful to share in, to have somebody else communicate to you. And it's kind of cool for me, who has been studying philosophy now for more than half of my life and teaching it for, not quite half my life, but 25 years, to get to participate vicariously in somebody else having those sorts of experiences. Now, it's not that I don't have that at all, but much of what I'm doing is going back over old ground as I get ready to teach it, or I go back to an author who I've already read, and I kind of know a lot of the lay of the land. I'm not discovering things through fresh eyes much of the time, although it does happen for me sometimes. Sometimes my rereads result in saying, oh wow, I really misjudged this person here. There was a lot more to their work. So coming back to my client and friend, this is, as I mentioned, a sign that things are going the way that they ought to. When we study philosophy, it's not so much about finding the right little, shelf or cubbyhole compartment to put each thing in and classify them, put them in a little bottle and stick them away so that we can preserve them forever. No. Philosophy, in significant part, is a very active pursuit and discipline, and that's contained in the philosophical works that we often study. Not all of them, but many of them. And to be able to accumulate a network, a nexus, however you conceive of it, all these different interconnected nodes becoming richer, denser, more able to be used. That is exactly what you want to see, both for yourself and for others. You want people to be able to make connections and associations and to draw comparisons and notice dissimilarities as well, to draw distinctions. That's part of what we do in philosophy, and not just philosophy, but in other fields as well. So we could say philosophy in the very broad sense, where it can encompass and extend into other disciplinary matters. So I think that if you yourself are experiencing something like that, that's quite wonderful. Now, you do have to be on guard, as I've pointed out in other videos, about drawing too simplistic connections that maybe aren't actually there. You see the same term being used and you're not being critical enough and discerning that it's being used in this way by this person and this way by this person, or you forget that a lot of these works are actually translated and the translator's choice to use this term and another translator's choice to use this term might not actually mean that they're the same idea. But that's a failure within a success, you could say, right? You can make that mistaken inference because you're starting to see that these things are in fact connected. And it's not just noticing these sorts of connections between different authors and asking about that and working that out. It's also seeing within one single author's work how the different concepts, how the different ideas are interconnected with each other. They sort of like with a musical composition, right? You can play each part separately from the other, but when you put them together, you get something that is greater than the sum of its parts. The whole contains harmonies, disharmonies, various movements, changes, and all these things that go into a interesting and successful composition. And we could, come up with all sorts of metaphors for that. I don't need to labor these too much, but I just wanted to talk about this a little bit and to say, hey, if you yourself are experiencing that sort of, hey, I see these things are connected with each other, and I'm looking in my own mind and I'm finding this increasingly complex set of ideas that are, woven together, evoking each other, however you want to phrase it, that's a good thing. And that's something that you want to hold on to as a possession for yourself. Now, you can't sell it for any money. I don't know that it's going to get you any prestige or any of those sorts of things. But it is something that you can take pride in and realize, as an index, that you are making progress. And I think taking stock of that can be quite helpful, quite important. It can reinforce that you're on the right track in studying this weird stuff that other people don't seem to be into or value only on a superficial level. So maybe that's a useful pep talk for some of you. Maybe it's helpful to hear somebody else going through a similar experience, recounting somebody else's similar experience. I hope that it proves useful to you, these little reflections on this experience, this wonderful experience that one of my interlocutors has articulated.